Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events that make Rhode Island a good place to live, that build our communities. No matter what you hear, there always are thousands of people working behind the scenes to make Rhode Island a better place. Today we're going to be talking about some people who are really working hard night and day, 24/7, to make sure that people are learning about peace, people are protected, people are working toward peace themselves in their own communities and staying away from gangs. Today we're going to be talking to the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, and I always want to put peace in that title because I just assume that if there's nonviolence, then people are going to learn to move toward peace with one another. But I want to welcome today Ajay Benton, who's here. He is the victims outreach worker, and Abraham Henderson, who's here as director of AmeriCorps. But they both also represent all of the Institute for Study and Practice of Nonviolence. Tell me how you got involved with this organization. It sounds like it would be hard to get into. You must have studied nonviolence and peace yourself.
Not necessarily initially in the beginning. I'm actually a former juvenile correctional officer at the Rhode Island Training School for about 4.5, 5 years. And at the time I was also teaching a night reading class at the ACI. But during my time working in juvenile corrections, I actually ended up applying to graduate school and getting my master's in teaching. And then right after graduate school, I connected with the Institute for Nonviolence. I saw that the work that they were doing with the training school and the ACI and with folks just getting released. And I connected with the Institute and got involved. I was actually one of the first reentry coordinators at the Institute for Nonviolence, and that was basically helping young men between the ages of 18 and 25 years old, violent offenders, majority gang affiliated, but not all, helping them transition from the prison, from the ACI, back into the community. So connecting them with services, whether it was for health services, GED, educational advancement, employment skills training, even mediation, if they had issues on the street to try to resolve issues with their family. So I connected them from the prison system back into the community, but it was all through the Institute of Nonviolence. That's where the home base was. And this past year I was promoted to be the AmeriCorps director at the Institute for Nonviolence and lead a core team of 16 young individuals from around the United States and over here locally in Rhode Island, the city of Providence, to provide a year of community service.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to ask you, Ajay, how did you get involved in this Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence?
I was fairly young. I got introduced to the Institute through Roosevelt Bells Benton, Cedric Huntley, two very positive activists in South Providence who met with Tenny Groves, Father Ann and Sister Ann Keefe, who was starting the Institute back then, and they were starting off the street worker program. That's where Tenny came in, and I was one of the original 3 guys. At the time I was 23 and there was 2 other guys, and I was just somebody who worked. I was born and raised in South Providence in a Boys and Girls Club. So as I got older, I always went back to the Boys Club, helped out with kids with their homework, played basketball, teach kids in the gym. So they saw something in me that I didn't know that I even had. And they offered me the job, and I looked at the opportunity, and I took advantage of it, and I've been with the Institute since then.
Okay, so the Institute started with Tenny, who was a social worker, or
Tenny was a street worker from Boston.
From Boston, and with 2 clergy people, or 2 people who were in the Catholic Church, is that right?
Sister Ann, Brother.
And then you got their building Is that right? Or somehow you got some of their building, and then
Yes,
you
they-
started as a settled place, not just on the streets without a focus, but you had that focus then.
They rented out some space to us. It was on the 3rd floor of their rectory. That's where we started off
Okay.
at. There was this building that the city owned that they wasn't using. That was right next door to St. Michael's Church. So they ended up selling the building to St. Michael's. And then Tenny bought it from Sister Ann, and they've been working on it ever since. But the street workers, all our work was done out in the streets, out in the community, working with families and kids. And that's how everything got started to where we're at now.
And you actually go fairly far away from Oxford Street. I mean, you really are in all of Rhode Island, or at least all of Providence.
Definitely in
right?
all of Providence, around Providence, but our victim services program contributes to Rhode Island. So they go outside Providence and they work with families that lost somebody to violence or something.
All right. So let's start with you then, Ajay, about families with victims, family victims. You go to the hospital, you were saying, and you see these victims as they've just coming into consciousness, and you talk to them about what's happened and how you can help them.
Yeah, so working in victim services, I follow up to all victims of violence within the city of Providence. A lot of times I'm there before the families get there. I'm there in the room talking to them, or just there as a positive person, because the doctors, they're working on an individual to save that person's life. So sometimes I'm in the room, sometimes in the hallway. Sometimes I'm the first phone call that the family may get hearing about their loved one being a victim to violence. If I work with them, I stay with them from the hospital once they go home, just to make sure there's a lot of things that street workers get involved too, to make sure there's not a retaliation, to make sure that person is getting all the services that they need to move forward, get their life back on track.
I would think retaliation and the fear of the victim would be a major part of your work.
It is a major part of our work. In the first 36 to 72 hours, individuals that's been a victim to violence are known to respond within them hours. If we can stop a crew or friend or that person, him or herself, from responding or reacting to violence in that amount of time, it prevents a retaliation, that prevents another person coming to the hospital for another act of violence, and it prevents another family after going through somebody in their life being a victim.
That sounds pretty complicated. I've worked in the city, and I wouldn't know how to stop the violence that might take place because someone was injured.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how you do that.
I've been doing it for so many years. I started off, like I said, as a street worker, and I grew as a street worker, and I just got to know so many people over
So
the
you
years.
can call the right people and say, look, such and such been injured. It's probably these people who were helping to perpetrate that crime. Can you do something about them? Can you help them?
Definitely,
Can
like
you
we definitely get involved. A lot of times we know who the suspect is, we know who the victim is. A lot of times it's the the person in the wrong place, wrong time. So a lot of innocent bystanders sometimes, but a lot of times it is the person that was targeted. So we're able to work on that because we know so many individuals, and a lot of people know us by now. They know who I am. They know who the street workers are. They know people that work for the Institute, what they're about, what we carry. So we built like a lot of respect also in just what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have programs for the families of victims, don't you?
Well, we also set a lot of families that work, counseling, that purposes. We also have, I'm trying to think of how this program.
Education and employment.
What is it? Sorry.
The Education and Employment Department.
Which we plug in a lot of our clients into, from job skills to GED to life skills, nonviolence training. And then from there, like they become part of the Institute, and they see how driven we are to help them better their lives and better their decisions going forward. A lot of people, they may have you heard bad stories about the Institute, or heard that we work with certain law enforcement, and we have to. And once we explain to them and we talk to them about what we do and how we can help, a lot of people see like, oh, they're really here just to help me get my life back on track, or help me move forward from this incident, and actually better their lives. And a lot of people, they refer their friends. So now people are telling their friends about the Institute, and that's the overall goal.
It interests me that, and I think we all need to be educated about this, but that you see a direct connection between violence and the need for education.
Definitely.
And then the need for education and betterment of life and better quality of life.
Definitely.
And reduction of violence. So in a way, it's just one continuous equation for you. You see them all as interrelated.
Yes.
And,
So it's a step process getting them from that person that was sitting in the hospital to not retaliating, to being open to the programs we have at the Institute. Then once we get them in our building and we start offering them services or getting them plugged, and they see that they can do this work with the support that we give them, and going on to the next step. And a lot of times, once a friend takes that first initial step, now his or her peers are seeing that person be successful. I want that too.
yes.
So now their friends start coming in, and once they're involved in the Institute, they don't have time to hang out on the streets and get involved into negative activity or harm somebody or be in a situation where they can get themselves harmed.
And they don't need to feel that they need the power of a gang to make
gang,
them,
a crew.
to make their identity.
A gun, a weapon, and nonviolence is a way of how you carry yourself, how you treat others. So also it just automatically just prevents bullying also in so many aspects. And a lot of kids that we work with, they have younger siblings that look up to them, or they have peers that look up to them. So when they see that person change their ways and act in a different way and positive things that happen for them, they also want that too.
And sometimes there's a both and. People are in both worlds still, and still trying to make their way into the world of nonviolence.
Yeah, we call that person on the fence. Like
Yeah.
he got 1 foot over here, got 1 foot over here.
Right.
But it's like a maturity. People, they mature differently in their life stages. So we stick with them. We never turn our back on anybody. We have plenty of clients who went to prison for something else or went to prison for doing something violent. We actually go to the training school or try to go to the ACI to visit them and then work with them on a plan out for when they come out to better their choices and situations. And also we stop recidivism from happening also. But a lot of times when a person goes in, they come out, they go back to that same environment they was in where they committed that crime or victimized that person or that family. So we want to work with them so that person doesn't commit them same acts again. So we don't give up on them. We know that there's good in all people, so we stay with them until that person, until we see that change and that person is ready.
That's a really good definition of human nature.
Yeah.
Always perfectible, and it's true of all of us.
Yeah.
All of us fall short.
A lot of times.
All of us don't do everything we want to do. We don't do
So
it
keeping
well.
that support there
Yeah.
for that individual and that family goes a long way.
That's really important. Abraham, you're on another side. You're sort of talking to people as they're coming into the system, maybe, or they haven't done anything yet to get them into the victims program. But Abraham, you're working right now with director of AmeriCorps, and I think of that as a national program where people come into the city in the summer, and I probably need to have a new definition.
Well, first, thank you for having us on your show. We appreciate it a great deal. Also, I mean, before I even get into it, just to reiterate what Ajay was saying, is that we don't follow through with the people that we serve, we follow with. So it's everything from the families that we're working with. So we have a lot of folks that come to the Institute where they're clients, you know. Before they were clients, they were their children, and we knew their relatives. And unfortunately, how the system works is, you know, that recidivism is not just recidivism into prison, but it's recidivism into violence. You know, there's generational recidivism. So a lot of the folks, we've known their families. You know, we follow them through the process so they could have a better life. And just like with anything else, right, we have folks that are going to, for lack of a better term, relapse. Okay? It takes, just like somebody who may be addicted to alcohol or some other kind of substance, violence is also another kind of substance where somebody may make a mistake 4 or 5 times before they actually realize, I don't want to do this anymore. I need to change my lifestyle. So the Institute is there for folks like that, okay? I mean, it's our community. We love our folks, and the folks is everybody, you know, but we follow through with them. We follow with them through the entire process. And it just kind of reminds me of what my professor in college used to always say. It's not about loving tough. It's not about tough love, but it's about loving tough. That no matter what you do, we're still going to love you regardless because we see something better in you.
But to me, that's such a radical intervention to have someone in the society, a stranger, saying, no matter what you do, we're going to stand with you. We're going to walk this with you, even though it's really hard for you. To me, that is such a radical thing that few of us actually have. I admire you for that kind of perseverance and that kind of vision.
The unfortunate thing that it's considered radical to begin with.
It
should just be just a humanity
You're right.
thing.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I don't know what ancient cultures did, but I know what our culture does, and that is basically we let our kids raise themselves in a lot of cases. So tell me about AmeriCorps now.
So AmeriCorps, actually, it's a nationwide program. It's a federally funded program. So what you'll find, there's all different kinds of AmeriCorps. There's people that do AmeriCorps part-time, people that do AmeriCorps full-time. There's Vistas. But the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, we are one of the programs in the state of Rhode Island. I believe 1 out of 32 altogether. So we have some AmeriCorps folks that are working with homeless, some folks that are working with veterans who just came back from their service. We have folks working with immigrant families, with children ready to read, working with that literacy campaign. At the Institute for Nonviolence, our particular focus is on nonviolence. So what we do is we take folks from around the country, college students, folks that are taking a year out of college, folks that even graduated graduate school, folks that are thinking about making that transition to college, folks that just got out of the prison system itself. So from our 16 AmeriCorps members, it's a very diverse group of folks, but that's exactly what we want. We don't want more than this and that. We like that melting pot because that's really what the Institute is.
That's what life is.
That's what life is. So we have folks that are partaking a year of their life providing service to a community that's in need, and they're teaching nonviolence. We have our team that is working with programming. They're our most mobile unit, and they go out into the community and they teach nonviolence at the ACI, at the Adult Correctional Institute here in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island Training School, our Juvenile Detention Center. They also go to the private setting. So it's not just an inner city problem per se, but we also understand that in other classes, quote unquote, that they also have violent issues. Violence isn't just inner city problem, but there's violence that's happening in communities that have a lot of money. So we have folks that teach nonviolence at the Moses Brown School, for example. We've taught nonviolence training with the Providence Police Force before. We also have AmeriCorps folks that are working with, like Ajay mentioned, in our building, doing education and employment. Education and employment for folks that are just coming back into the community from being incarcerated, majority, and teaching them skills on how they can get employment, how to get their GED so they can go back into the workforce. Again, following with them through the process. Victim services, which Ajay mentioned, we have an AmeriCorps person working with them, providing services for families going through those traumatic experiences, those moments of their life. And then we also have our school team. We have 6 core members that are working with 2 inner city public schools in Providence and with Central Falls High School, working with them, understanding the issues they have, teaching them nonviolence, kind of like a supplemental education class on top of their regular courses that they have. And I'm just the program director, make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible, and making sure that we stay in function and make sure everybody's doing what they need to do.
Oh, good for you. I just need to say that you're watching Good News Rhode Island, and today we're talking to the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, a really important good news place in Providence. So if I were in a school and I had you coming as a teacher, what kinds of things would I do? Would I talk about violence that's happened to me? Would I talk about violence that I've done? Would I listen to other people talk about violence and then talk about how I want my life to be? I mean, how do you get into these kids' discussions? How do you seed nonviolence into a discussion with kids?
The thing about violence that happens in the schools is a small percentage of kids. It's probably like a 2-3% that get that much attention. But even going into an auditorium, going to a classroom, a lot of times a teacher or the school will get their most troubled group of kids, and we will go reach out and talk to them. We will break down like violence, what it leads to, what you're missing out on as far as education, how, like we kind of talk about all the things the teachers and the staff talk to them about already, but we're coming from like their culture. We're using their words, their language, their attitude, and we're talking to them at their level, where sometimes you have to do just to communicate or get the message across to them.
Why not?
And understand like the importance of school and what you're doing, and just talking about, just talk about history, because they live in Providence. So if you walk down a certain part of Broad Street, you see a lot of people who didn't take education seriously. Did not take education seriously, or did not take their life seriously, and made some bad decisions. And the Institute is here to prevent that from happening, going forth with them individuals. But the stories go a lot more in depth. They go a lot more, they touch home base. Because we talked about missing fathers in the homes, single mothers working 2 to 3 jobs, and you kids are in school acting like this. So we bring a lot of it, or what's happening, in their face, and put it in their face so they can really get a good picture. And hopefully that
siblings protecting other siblings,
exactly,
because they're concerned about them.
So hopefully that wakes them up. Like I said, it's a real small percentage. What street workers will actually do. If Sal or the nonviolence training department, they would train nonviolence, and they would use some of them scenarios, but it's a broader syllabus, I guess you can say. In a sense, when they do the training.
Really a problem, isn't it? It's something hard to crack. It's hard to get into the patterns that have started maybe from their parents' generation. And
it is, because violence is to a teenager, not violence, but not to a teenager. The street life is freedom. As a teenager, the first sense of freedom, being out with your friends, no parent, you can say what you want, do what you want, in a sense, until it all leads to that one bad decision that involves the police, or involves you hurting somebody, or making a bad decision that caused somebody to hurt you. A lot of teenagers, they think they're invincible until something happens. But it draws attention. It's in music, it's in movies, it's in theater. They see
everywhere.
It's in video games.
If you watch previews, you
so
cannot believe how violent the previews are.
The previews, the commercials. So it's in all that stuff. A lot of kids, they see it, but a lot of times at home, parents are not having that conversation with them or talking to them like, this is just entertainment. These artists are doing this for entertainment. They don't really live that life, majority of them.
Let's pretend that the two of you come into a school and you're going to be talking to kids about bullying. Because we initially wanted you to come to talk about bullying, and I think it's a very small part of this huge picture that you've just painted. But bullying goes on in the average kid that may never come to the police's attention. Can you talk, what would you say if you were going to come to a school and talk about bullying, or how would you define bullying? How would I know if I were seeing it?
I think well, first I'll say the great thing about teaching nonviolence is really, it's critical thinking. It's thinking really critically about violent issues. So giving them that training is just like, well, why this and why that? What role do you play? For example, like Ajay talked a little bit about the population of folks that constantly get in trouble, that 2 to 3%. Well, guess what? That 2 to 3%, trust me, they've seen it. They're being told that they're bad people, you know what I'm saying? And all these things, even society, things that they buy into. But it's just like as much as people telling that you're a problem, you're a problem, you're a problem. Our philosophy is also, well, you could also be the solution. All right? So when we go into settings of bullying and things like that, where that's an issue, we try to really make sure that everybody is accountable. Hold yourself accountable first. Kind of, for lack of a better word, police yourself. Okay? We talk about the history of bullying. We talk about the Holocaust. We talk about the Civil Rights Movement. Okay? And then we take it from everything from the historical perspective all the way to the internal perspective. It's like, why would you let somebody do that to somebody else? Your own classmate, your own brother, your own sister, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of different pedagogical approaches, I guess you can say, on how you could be a proactive participant in peace.
But if I'm not a bully, then people won't think I'm important.
Bullying comes from somewhere. It's taught. bullying is not, it's not natural. So it comes from a big brother or father or somewhere, or somebody else bullied you in school. You're naturally bullied because it's somehow it's taught and it's not corrected, and it comes in so many different forms that sometimes kids don't realize that they're doing this, or they're making this kid or making somebody feel that way until that person actually speaks out. But like you said, a lot of times most kids don't speak out or don't say nothing about it because they see that person as just being that type of individual. That's just their character. But it's a taught thing, and once you realize or bring knowledge to somebody about bullying and make them see what they're doing, how they're making other people feel, it kind of corrects itself, or that person will eventually correct himself. What's one of our sayings in the 6 principles? Don't
attack the person committing the evil act.
Yeah.
Attack the systems that are creating the act.
That's creating the act, because not always just that individual. Like I said, it's taught. So you have to figure out where it's taught and kind of prevent that or stop that from happening.
None of us are independent. All of
Yeah.
us are dependent on each other and on the community and on
Definitely.
the society. And when you go into a school, are the kids receptive initially to what you're talking about? I mean, you look like big, successful guys, so maybe they listen to you.
It depends on the conversation. If I'm talking about sports, it depends what I connect the conversation to. If I connect it to music, if I connect it to movies, I connect it to something that they're interested in, they pay attention to it. But if I'm talking about something as far as like nonviolence and Martin Luther King and Gandhi, they'll go to sleep. I have to connect that to something that's irrelevant in their lives today.
Even that, you know, so it's like I think we try to meet them where just what AJ is saying, meeting them where they're at. You know, and the great thing about the Institute for Nonviolence is, like I said, we're a very diverse group. So we have folks, for example, me and AJ, we're from Providence. We're from the community, from the South Side, East Side, West. We have folks from the West End. We have, obviously, our executive director, Tenny Gross. He's coming from Israel. We have folks that have done time in prisons. We have folks that are coming from New Hampshire that work there. So it's kind of such a diverse group of people going to these kids. And they get it. I think the majority of folks get it.
Definitely.
And even if they're not turned on it, how can we turn them on to Gandhi? How can we turn them on to Martin Luther King? How can we put them on to all these events that are happening around the world? It's about the delivery
Just remembering
and how it's packaged.
Boston yesterday, Boston anniversary. We only have 1 minute left. If there was one thing that you could say, if there were one thing that you would say to everyone about nonviolence, what would it be? And I know that's a hard question for 1 minute left, but
What came to my mind is, if you see violence happening, do something about it. Don't stand there and just be a witness. Try to prevent it from happening. Try to stop it. Say something, or make a phone call to hopefully prevent that act from happening. Just don't accept it and think that it just happens here and it's normal. It's not normal.
I would say 2 words: love tough. Love regardless, no matter what somebody does. Love tough. And then try to remedy the situation.
it seems to me that loving is always a good answer, and it's always tough. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, AJ and Abraham. Thank you to the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence for everything you're doing behind the scenes. We hope that there's good news in your community, that you're helping to make it, that you're working toward nonviolence and peace. Good news is right around the corner, and probably you're helping to make it. Take care. Thanks for watching.